Hey guys, this is week 10 and my final week of my fantasy hockey podcast capstone project. As this is the final week, I'll be following up this video with a shorter overall recap video. Obviously, you know this process by now, so I'm going to start off with a recap and then I'll go over with what my predictions were last week and then what my predictions are this week. So starting off with a recap of week 9, I won my week 9 matchup by 80 points. This win will improve my record to 7-2-0, which has propelled me to second place in the league, which is quite good considering there are 10 teams. As for my players that did good, starting off we have Sidney Crosby, who put up 50 points. He had another big week last week. He scored 4 goals and 1 assist, which is obviously great for fantasy points. His goals are very dominant for scoring fantasy points. The next big player was Connor McDavid, who had 60 points. This is almost to be expected at this point. Connor McDavid is the best player in the league, and he keeps proving it day in and day out. My next best player was Jacob Chitrin. He had 43 points. Him and Clayton Keller both had big weeks on the Arizona Coyotes, even if the Coyotes didn't perform well themselves. They are pretty much the only consistent scorers on the team, and Chitrin may get a move at the deadline to be even better, so he is still worth definitely holding on to. My next big player was Clayton Keller, obviously for the same reasons as above. He had another big week. He scored a hat trick. My next big player was Jake Ottinger. He had 31 points. Him and the Dallas Stars have both been consistent this year. They've both been good, and even the forwards and defense on the Stars have been very good at helping him out as well. Now for my players who underperformed this week, we have Jose Saros with 8 points. He didn't necessarily play bad, but his team didn't help him out on offense or defense. So not getting those wins really hurts his points, and he didn't start one of the 3 games he could have. My next bad player was Jordan Kyrou with 9 points. The Blues were obviously poor to start the season, and then good, and now they're back to being poor. They haven't been winning, but they have been scoring a few goals. So it's kind of surprising not to see Kyrou start scoring. That being said, both of his line mates just came back from injury, and Buchnevich is still injured. Alright, moving on to my predictions for last week. I'll be covering all the predictions I made last week and I believe are notable and worthwhile. First up, we have Jeff Skinner and Dylan Cousins, both of whom continue to play very well. Jeff Skinner I added onto my team, who had about 30 fantasy points for me. He had a big 4-point night and another night with 1 goal. Unfortunately, he was suspended, so he missed the rest of the week, but even though that 2 games put up a solid amount of points for my team, that it didn't need anything else. Dylan Cousins, on the other hand, played really well as well. He didn't get suspended, so he played all the games they had, and he put up a solid number of fantasy points, somewhere in the 35 to 40 range, I believe. Next up is Sean Dursey. Dursey was pretty good this week. He scored 3 assists and had about 23 fantasy points, which is solid outing for any fantasy defenseman, let alone one that you picked up off waivers. I'm not sure if this will increase or stay the same, as Dursey is pretty shaky on defense, but he's pretty good on offense, so we'll see how consistent he is moving forward. The next person I recommend adding was Dan Vladar. Seeing as though he was going to be replacing Jacob Markstrom, I assumed he would be solid considering his outings from last year, but he was alright this week and it wasn't anything amazing. The Flames themselves aren't a good team anymore, and they can't score and they can't defend, which doesn't help him, similar to the situation Jose Saros is in. The next player I recommended was Seth Jarvis. Unfortunately, Jarvis and the Canes only played 2 games last week, and he played okay in both, but not particularly well. Because of this, I don't think he's really worth keeping. I think there are better players I'll go over this week, later in the video, that are worth more than he is. The next player I recommended was Alex Newhook. Newhook was great last week. He had 3 points in 3 games with 2 goals and 1 assist. His ice time most notably increased a lot by about 9 minutes a game, which is just amazing. And obviously he's playing with Mikko Rantanen now and much better line mates. So his opportunities to score will go up exponentially. He's very much worth holding on to. Now, obviously, since this is the final week, I know you all know I'm not going to go over the players I recommended trading for or trading away or dropping. But there is one player I want to highlight in particular, and that will be Michael Bunting. I still believe he's worth trading for. He played very well last week with 4 points in 3 games, and playing with a guy like Mitch Marner, who is on a 22-game point streak, and somebody else like Austin Matthews or even Jonathan Tavares or William Nylander, who we'll go over more in this video, is very helpful to his scoring, and he is definitely a valuable winger to have. Alright, as for this week, go over who I think you should add, who I think you should trade away and drop, and who I think you should trade for. First off, we have Robert Thomas. He's about 56% rostered. He hasn't been playing well this year and started off slow with an injury, but now that he is healthy, he is getting back to pace about an assist every game, which is very good. Obviously, if he scores even just 1 goal every 3 or 4 games, he'll put up really good fantasy numbers. Especially when Buchnevich comes back and Kyrou plays as well as he should be, that line should be dominant again, and it should be very good. Next player I recommend adding is Jake Allen. He's 36% rostered. Allen is a very good goalie, I believe, that has always had some injury troubles. Seeing as though he plays on the Montreal Canadiens, he's obviously going to struggle, but that also means that he faces the most amount of shots against in the league, which is good because he saves most of them, which gives you free fantasy points. Now, when he is healthy like he is now, he will be starting most games because they don't really have any backup options. Moving on, we have Michael Backlund at 17%. Backlund has stepped up and fulfilled that role that either Kadri or Huberdeau was supposed to fill after they were acquired in the offseason last year and Jonathan Gaudreau left. But since they have not been able to fulfill that, Backlund has stepped up in the last few games and has recorded an assist a game for about the last 5 games, which is very consistent. And his ice time is going up as well. Next player I think you should add is Evander Kane, who's 86% rostered. He's not widely available in most leagues, obviously, but after his injury, he was dropped by a few teams in a few leagues. If he comes back, which he will, but if he comes back soon, like sometime by January, he'll obviously be McDavid's #1 option, and he'll be extremely viable as he's a top 6 winger, and he'll put up anywhere from 30 to 40 points a week. Lastly, I think you should add Matthew Duchene. He's at 78% rostered, which isn't obviously super available, but he is going down. After a disappointing first 10 weeks, Duchene and the Predators have both been pretty poor, and so he's being undervalued massively, especially since this is a guy who scored up 86 points and 43 goals, which is just incredible last season. So I think he's at least worth a hold for another 2 to 3 weeks before you make a big decision as to whether you should drop him. Okay, moving on to who I think should trade away. First up, we have Jeremy Swayman, 67% rostered. It's clear who the starter is, and it's obviously Ullmark. Swayman played a game against Arizona to see how he would do, and he put up -5 points, which is just a terrible outing against a not-so-good Arizona team. He will not see much ice time or many games started after this. Better off with just someone else. I'd recommend just straight up dropping him. And next up, I have William Karlsson, 31% rostered. He was alright in the beginning of the season and has added more, but now he's kind of fallen off and hasn't scored much since then, and hasn't really showed much signs of improvement as he has been up and down the second and third lines, but not really cracked the first line much. I recommend just dropping him. Lastly, we have Vince Dunn at 54%. He had his chance to prove himself on Power Play 1 as they don't have a solidified #1 defenseman on Seattle, but he didn't really show it at all, and he hasn't really proven it, so I don't believe he'll be playing there. He'll be dropped back down, and so his chances of scoring 3 points will be lowered exponentially, which means that he won't be as useful for you. Alright, moving on, we have players I think you should trade for. Starting off, we have Alex DeBrincat at 94% rostered. His value is not as high as years past, and he started off slow this season, but he's slowly gotten better as his chemistry with Claude Giroux and Tim Stützle has improved. Obviously, this takes some time, so people are undervaluing him, so I think you can get him for not cheap, but cheaper than what he should be going for. Next up, we have William Nylander at 97%. Nylander has been playing great this year, obviously alongside Marner and Tavares and Matthews and Bunting and Morgan Riley. The Leafs have been going really good as well, so I think he's a player that could put up a lot of points this year. I think he'll most definitely crack his personal record. So I think he's definitely a guy to look an eye out for if somebody makes him available. Lastly, we have Chris Kreider. He had a massive season last year, scoring over 50 goals, but he hasn't been nearly consistent this year, and neither have the Rangers. So I think he's still a good player worth grabbing if he's being undervalued by other teams in your league. Alright guys, that's it. That's all I have for week 10. Keep in mind this is the last video, or last actual episode for our podcast here. I will not be making any more as my capstone is due in December 14th. Thank you guys. See you later.